This is week 5, the second week of doing formulas. This booklet has some more examples, plus one extra concept you need to learn that's coming up a few examples in. The first one we start with in the booklet's very simple. Distance is equal to rate times time. So if I give you a rate of 120 kilometers an hour, and you're going to travel on the roads for 2.5 hours, all you have to do here is multiply the 120 by the 2.5 to get the distance. It's already arranged for D. Pretty straightforward. You want to solve for, and that would be 300 kilometers if you had to go for 2.5 hours. That's shown to you in example 1. Now if you want to solve this formula for R, you're going to have to get the R by itself. Also very simple. Get rid of the time. Divide both sides by T. So the rate, you want to find the speed which you're traveling. You take your distance, divide it by how long you traveled. So say, for example, you traveled 300 kilometers before in the original question, and that 300 kilometers was actually able to be done in 4.5 hours. Then if you divide those numbers, and you would get 66.6 repeating, and that will be a speed now in kilometers per hour, your rate. Speed would probably have a direction. 66.6 kilometers an hour is the rearrangement with the formula D equals RT. The second example in your booklet is the formula for the area of a triangle. The area of a triangle is equal to 1/2 the base times the height. To solve for the height, you have an H and a B and a 1/2, all together in one term. Therefore, you're going to have to get rid of the 1/2 and the B. Generally, a good idea to try and get rid of your fraction first. Again, this is all one term. Multiply this by 2 and the other side by 2. You've made no math errors. You're down to a much more simplified equation. Twice the area is equal to the base times the height. Now you're asked to solve for the height. You want to get rid of your base, so you divide both sides by B, and you're going to have 2A over B is going to equal H. So the height, or the altitude of a triangle, can be found if you know both the area and the base of a triangle. To rearrange, that was pretty straightforward. To put numbers in and solve the question, you have to be giving stuff. So say you want to find the height of a triangle. If you know the area is 130 square meters, so we'll substitute 130 for the area, and the base is 13 meters. What is the height? So you need to do twice the 130, give you 260, divided by your 13. You're going to get a height of 20, and the units were square meters divided by meters. So 20 meters was your height of your triangle. Now example 3 is a little more challenging in the way that it looks. It's the formula you should recognize for the area of a trapezoid. You've got the variable A, area, the variable H for the height, the B1 and the B2, which are both, of course, the bases of the trapezoid. We want to solve for the H. The first thing you should probably do here is again to clear your fraction. This whole thing this is all one big bracket, so one term times the H times the half. That's still all one term because it's in a bracket. If there was a plus out here, there'd be more than one term, but it's only one term. So if you take a 2, you times that by what the whole expression was, all that will do is cancel the 2's. Do it to both sides and you're even. Now you're left with a more simplified equation that says h is on to b1 plus b2 divided by 2a. And you want to solve for the height. Well, the height is already isolated out here in front of the bracket. And the height times b1 and b2, if you multiply the h through, you're going to have two h terms. You don't want that. You want to get the h by itself. If you divide by b1 plus b2 on both sides, you're going to have the h by itself. And your answer is going to be the height of a trapezoid is found by taking twice the area and dividing that by the sum of the two bases. H equals 2a over b1 plus b2. Now, if you have numbers to go along with this question, which is quite often the case, you're going to be given values for the area and the two bases. Let's do this example from the booklet. You are told that the area is 85.7 square meters. So 2 times the area, backwards 87.5, and the two bases are 11 and 14. So get out your calculator and see if you can come up with the answer. It's very simple, but yet students quite often get it wrong. 2 times 87.5, divide that by 25. Remember to do the bottom first. Well, do the bottom, divide it into the top, and then get your answer, which is going to be 7 meters again. So step by step, piece by piece, isolate your variable, and then rearrange your formula. This formula you should recognize as the formula for the volume of a cone. And you're asked to solve for the radius of a cone. So we need to isolate the r. The r is trapped in a term with a fraction. Therefore, let's multiply the entire right-hand side by the denominator of 3. So the 3's can cancel. And that will leave you with pi r squared h equals 3 times the volume. If you want to solve for r, you have to get rid of everything except for the r first. Let's divide by pi and h to get that isolated, both sides. Cancel the pi, cancel the h. You're left with the radius squared equals 3 times the volume divided by the product of pi and h. To solve for r, you've got to take the square root of r squared. Do the same thing to both sides. Therefore, your formula for the radius is going to equal 3 volumes, 3 times b, over pi times h. In the question in your booklet, for following along, you now need to find the radius if you know that the volume is going to equal 167.55. Write this formula properly. 3 times 167.55. Do that part in the top. You're going to divide that by the value of the height, which is 10 times pi. Okay, if you're going to get this right, you probably should do the entire top, get an answer, the entire bottom, get an answer, and then divide it, and then take this square root at the end. So 3 times 167.55 is going to give you around 500 and something, 502.65. Pi times 10, 3.14, by 10 is 31.4159, etc. Use your calculator, don't use your value for pi, the shorthand. Then you take 500 and divide it by 31. It's going to give you 15 point, some nines, bunch of nines. But again, use your calculator. Take the square root. It's going to give you 3.99999, which when you round it's going to give you an answer of 4. There's your radius. So watch your calculator work, and always do the entire portion under the root sign, get an answer, and then at the very end take your square root. Okay, here's the new part to this section that we haven't talked about before, and that is when you have a letter that appears more than once. Before I do this example on this slide, I want to backtrack. Last semester we learned the interest is found by taking the principal, multiplying it by the rate, multiplying it by the time. We also found out that if I asked you how much money you had to repay at the end of that borrowing period, you would take the amount that you would owe back in interest and add to that the amount that you had borrowed in the first place. So it was the principal plus the interest. If you now take this interest and replace it with PRT, you get a new formula. That the amount that you borrowed is going to equal the amount that you borrowed, the amount that you're going to get after the end of the loan, that you repay, or the amount you're going to get if you invest is going to equal, of course, the amount that you borrowed plus the fee for borrowing, or the amount that you were loaned plus the fee for being loaned. That's a bunch of variable. Bottom line, new formula, here it is. You've got to solve for P, the principal, and you do not know how much interest that you earned, but you do know the amount at the end and the rate and the time. So to solve for P, the first problem with this question is that it appears twice. And it's the only time you've seen one of these so far. The letter in question appears twice. So you need to learn a new skill. And that skill is called a common factor. It's quite simple. The letter appears in more than one term. Get all those terms together on one side. Well, they are in this question already. The second step is to take that term in common and factor it out so you can write it only once. I'm going to divide the P out of the P. And what is P divided by P? It's going to be a 1. I'm going to take the P out of PRT, and what's left? An R and a T. That's called removing a common factor. Now, it's actually easier to see in reverse once you see it done once by looking at the check. P times 1 gives you P, and P times RT gives you PRT. So all that I've done here is change the way that the equation is written from P plus PRT to P onto 1 plus RT for the specific reason that now the letter P only shows up in one spot in the equation. And I can definitely get it by itself, and it only shows up once. To do that, same rules apply. I'm going to multiply or do the dividing, do whatever's necessary to get it by itself. Right now the P is multiplied by 1 plus RT. So I'm going to divide by 1 plus RT. And that whole thing could cancel. As long as I do the same thing the other side, everything is good. What I'm left with is P on the right, and on the left, I have the area divided by 1 plus the rate times the time, and that equals the principal. So when your term appears more than once, you're going to have to factor it. So how does this apply to a question? Let's just say that you were told you wanted to know how much money did you put into a investment vehicle type situation if you know the rate was 3.25%. This is straight out of your booklet. And it was for 18 months. The time was 18 months. So a year and a half. 18 months. And that at the end, the money was worth $2,412.13. How much money was invested in the first place? So you have everything you need. You'd say, well, the principal was equal to 2412.13 divided by 1 plus the rate in decimal format, 0.0325, times that by the time of 18 divided by 12. So you would have to do 18 divided by 12 first, and then multiply that by the 0.0325, and then add 1 to that, and get an answer. Check your booklet, it's all done out for you there, and divide that into 2,412.13. Worked out to be 1.048. And the long and the short of it was the principal investment was $2,300 to give you an amount of $2,412 at the end of a year and a half, 18 months. So 2 more questions to go. The next one, pretty straightforward, but it's not so much straightforward when you see, oh, there's an E in 2 terms. P equals E times I1 plus E times I2. So I1 and I2 are different terms, and I want to solve for E. E appears twice. First order business, get both of the E terms together on one side. So that's good. Second step, divide that common term out of both or 3, or whatever you happen to have, terms. Take the E out. What's left? Well, an I1 plus an I2. Now double check that you did that right by multiplying it back. Would E times I1 give you the original? Sure, would EI1. Would E times I2 give you the original? Plus EI2? Sure it would. All I've done is take out what's called the common factor. So that's now separated. You'll now see only one E as opposed to seeing it twice. Now if I want to get the E by itself, I've got to do the opposite, and I've got to divide both sides by I1 plus I2. And that will cancel everything on the right, but I've got to also do it on the left. So my final answer will be E equals the power divided by the sum of the currents, I1 plus I2. When you have a letter appear more than once, factor it first and then isolate, and you'll be done. Last question, a nice dirty one for the road. You've got the letter I to solve for, and it appears twice. And it's trapped inside of a fraction. So you are first of all going to have to clear the fraction. So if I do that, I'm going to multiply the left by the denominator of capital I to get it to cancel. But I'm going to also multiply the right by capital I to keep it even. So now I've got E minus IR equals I capital R. And I'm asked to solve for I. And the rules say get all the terms together that you want to solve for. I want all the big I's together. If I move this I to the right, it becomes positive. The E would stay on the left. And I would have IR capital plus IR lowercase. Now remove the capital I by dividing it out of both terms. IR divided by I is an R. IR divided by I is a little r. And then my last step will be to divide both sides by whatever's multiplied by the I, which is R plus R, both sides, and that'll cancel, leaving me with E over R plus R equals I. And that's it. Rearranging with a new concept of a common factor if the letter appears more than once in your equation. Otherwise, all the same concepts from last week still apply, and it's just a matter of practice. Good luck.